reality. It became important to consistently market the city through symbols and conceptual projects. The vision of a world-class city was all about creating a vibrant and growing city that mixed different functions. The model often used for this was the intensive urban environment of the inner city, with its diverse range of housing and workplaces. Cultural life had developed into one of the cornerstones of the city's branding strategies. The city's cultural life featured strong institutions, extensive local cultural activities, a dynamic cultural climate in all artistic areas, and a growing number of festivals. In an increasingly internationalized world, you're becoming one with your surroundings. The city, the facades, and materials, they are all dissolving and becoming part of you. You can no longer feel where you end and where the city begins. You breathe together, the city and you. And under the pavement, there is you. So, now we are ready. Now it's going to be much more simple. I'm going to sit there, and it's not going to be very visually exciting, apart from the memories in your head. So you can relax and lie on the floor if you want, hold someone's hand, text message, or whatever you do. It was likely to become even tougher in core industries, such as information and communications technology, biomedicine, finance, and environmental technology. To meet this challenge, the city played an important role in promoting a good business climate, so that companies were able to compete under these tough conditions, and so that the city remained an attractive place to relocate. To make the vision a reality, it was essential to have shared goals and partnerships between the city, public sector players, and the business community. New state sector governance became more flexible and harmonized, particularly for the application of planning and construction legislation. The city's conclusion was that there was a need for long-term and collective development work, with a focus not only on the individual districts, but also on how different parts of the city related to one another, and, above all, how the labour market could become more integrated. With these issues as a starting point, work on the vision finally began. The people of the city moved over ever greater geographic areas to shop, work, go to school, meet friends, and so on. As well as journeys into the inner city, an increasing number of people needed to move between different destinations in the outer city and beyond the city's boundaries. Poor cross-city public transportation links and physical barriers in the form of roads and unsafe areas. So these were some excerpts from the comprehensive plan, a city plan that in March 2010 became the official guiding document for the planning of the city. So from here on, I will go through some examples to try to give you a better understanding of what kind of environment the future has become. What world your visions for the future ended up creating. The first examples here is about you. It's about your generation. It's about your times. You still believe that you live in the era of information, that your technologies are about producing, organizing, and distributing information. You are wrong. You live in the era of attention. It is not you who consume information. It is information that consumes you. You are still obsessed with objects. Your whole culture has been founded on the economy of stuff. This is no longer true. Just look at yourself. All that sheep cotton that you are dragging around, it is very primitive. It's disgusting. But you can't see it yet. As the artist Britney Spears once put it, there is only two types of people in the world. the ones that entertain and the ones that observe. The only resource that is truly rare is attention. In a world where things and information comes in endless supplies, the only thing of which there is never enough is the attention of human minds. What is the point using energy to produce what is never used, never looked at, never consumed? So how do you survive in an economy of attention? Well, you get as many as possible to spend time on something you have produced. You become rich by doing really good, by being really good at spending time. Learn to focus and direct your attention, and you can become a professional consumer. Attention is the currency of the future. So in these times, all transactions are managed through an extremely efficient, fluid and pure system of consumption. There are, of course, still things. The physical layer of reality still exists. It's just that it doesn't really matter. It is, I would imagine, a bit like your relationship to dirt. Yes, of course you can use it to make a cup or a vase, or even cultivate it and plant something in it. But why should you? You have to live the paradox of stuff. The stuff you dig out of the Earth's crust becomes, in an information economy, less important than the information that informs it, what you think about the stuff. The more you think about that information, the more you understand about stuff, the more real the stuff becomes. So from this perspective, the more you see that style matters more than substance, the more you see the vital role, the vitality of substance. It is like a double hunger. By being obsessed, staring at the surface, we become more and more overcome by a desire for the real to exist. Each needs the other. The real thing is the real thing. I feel fine. I feel buoyant and light and resilient. I have a feeling that my hands are not resting against this chair. I see flashes of colour, quite a bit. It seems to have an awful amount of complementary violet and yellow. I assume it is grey. I have a wavering tendency, a very pleasant feeling of nausea. The pulsation becomes more intelligent. The floor feels like I'm watching it. Somehow, I try to rescue myself from the idea that there are so many realities here. I feel like an observer. This is purple, isn't it? It seems to me that I can't seem to say what I want to say. I like to find out which reality I'm in. This feeling comes over me of the singing of angels. I want to feed this feeling of joy. I feel like I'm not myself. I'm like a lot of other people. Trendiness, not timelessness. Repetition, not rarity. Objects don't matter. Conceptual art gets you nowhere. Create stuff you can sell. Live in the present. That's where value is added. Don't build your house into eternity. My work has no future at all. I know that. A few years from now, my work will mean nothing. And this is why the comprehensive plan was so important. Before, cities were based on the needs of its citizens. A time when politicians still talked about housing as a fundamental right. Public space was created as a preemptive strike against fascism. Through planning and design, a formula for a truly democratic city was being developed. Public buildings were erected to facilitate a sense of collective belonging. Whole systems planned to accumulate knowledge as well as financial wealth and dispersed for the common good. The city was reorganized in order to minimize the negative impact of the market economy. The city was actively trying to counter economic segregation through rent control and large investments in housing and infrastructure. City planning was based on the dream of a better society, on the possibilities that we could become better as humans, more decent in relation to each other. This was all wrong. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of how capital works. It had no future. It could not be allowed to have a future. So we had to get rid of architecture, or at least in the way you understand it. Architecture kept people apart, but this was not really a problem. The important thing was that architecture brought people together. Being such a slow medium, it had the capacity to carry hope through time. Architecture resisted change, often by just being really difficult to get rid of, but also because it could make people become attached to a place without it having any economical value. Sometimes the built environment even resisted attempts to be commercialized. It embodied struggle. It was not trustworthy. Even if you built it entirely as something else, it could suddenly transform into a symbol for something completely different. Architecture was too predictable in one situation just to turn around and become totally unpredictable in the next. Architecture was too much of a risk. So we started to construct the comprehensive plan, a homogeneous environment that could transform itself in an instant. The comprehensive plan was developed in order to perfectly align with any possible economical reality. A hyper-flexible structure that flickers and extends, subtracts and offsets, trims and splines and mirror copies itself into anything it needs to be. The society of your times can be understood to have been operating according to a three-tier model. On the micro level, it worked by individualization, by producing individuality in the form of sex, desiring subjects that was increasingly endowed with a depth to be deciphered. On the macro level, we saw the emergence of population, a statistical phenomena, which is to say individuals as they appeared in health, birth and mortality rates. Between them was an intermediary link, the family, as the site of exchange between the individual and the collective. On all three levels, life became the object of regulation and discipline. The traditional city was one such institution of discipline. And at the same time, an opposite force inside life itself emerged, a condition of possibilities, each with the attempt to extract a different life from the monitoring and correctional apparatus. This emerging force of resistance meant that every disciplinary diagram was met by a swarm of counteractions that overflowed. As an example, we could see that hospitals were abandoned in favor of the medicalization of urban space. Architecture as a mimetic paradigm comes to an end. From here on, architecture starts to understand itself as a system for the ordering and production of space, instead of as a representation of a pre-existing order, natural, cosmic or other. Architecture from then on worked as a set of fluid conditions, constantly fluctuating, forecasting future probabilities and adapting. Architecture no longer applies to a fixed state, but relates to a series of future events. The city becomes a system that attempts to plan an environment or milieu in relation to a set of possible events. On the contrary, social competition, what you call class struggle, is the essence of our economic existence, our reality. It is just that identity has been broken down into such small particles, almost to an atomic level. Identity has become so differentiated that it has become difficult to talk about group formations in a way you could understand. This means that it has become impossible for any kind of solidarity to exist. The foundation for solidarity is that we recognize something of ourselves in the encounter with others. In these times, we are so far apart that we are all exactly the same. A kind of systematic freedom. I'm one with everything I am. I can see everything in color. You have to see the air. You can't believe it. And the dimensions and the rays, and it's all coming down to you and moving. What is pleasant and unpleasant? It is all present. It is too beautiful. Can't you feel it? It is so beautiful and lovely and alive. You shouldn't say anything about anything. This is reality. If you look right over here, are you looking? Can you see? Oh, I wish I could talk in technicolor or let you see. Did you say you could see it? I can't tell you about it. If you can't see it, you just never know. I feel sorry for you. Hundreds of years ago, the architect Le Corbusier said, "A city made for speed is made for success." He was wrong. Well, he was right, of course, but he thought it was about cars. The fast pace of the car, of transportation, was just impossible to attach real commercial value to. It was too private and too shielded, too much speed through space. Instead, we had to get space to move through us. All streets full of strolling and browsing and drifting people. So we are on the very outskirts now. Wow, it looks absolutely stunning at night from the sky. It looks good, doesn't it? It looks otherworldly, unreal. I feel like I'm on a giant film set. We'll be there in a few minutes. The blood is pounding in my ears as my heartbeat accelerates and adrenaline spikes through my system. Oh my, I think I'm going to faint. My fate is in your hands. We are now among the buildings, and up ahead I can see a tall skyscraper with a helipad on top. The word is painted in white on top of the building. It's getting nearer and nearer, bigger and bigger, like my anxiety. A cityscape full of human resources. So many encounters that can be commercialized in an indefinite number of ways. Every moment has a potential financial value. The city is organized in such a way as to always optimize this value. Historic orders of work, division of labor and leisure time, family structures, ethnic backgrounds, cultural preferences, they kept us apart. It meant that the optimal possible productivity could never be realized. Spatial segregation, history of place and geopolitical difference was a financial disaster. So instead of spatial segregation, we needed to invest in economic segregation. The rich, the not so very rich and the poor needed to live together. Everyone constantly on the move, engaged in a floating state of productivity. New workforce constellations always ready to put into operation. To fuel this continuum of progress, history had to be destroyed. Political diversity is expanding endlessly. Cultural differences are subdivided into more and more possible identities. The environment has been constructed in such a way that as many encounters as possible happen at any given moment. The elevator arrives at the first floor, and I scramble out as soon as the doors slide open, stumbling once, but fortunately not sprawling onto the immaculate sandstone floor. I race for the wide glass doors, and I'm free in the bracing, cleansing, damp air. Raising my face, I welcome the cool, refreshing rain. I close my eyes and take a deep, purifying breath, trying to recover. I shake my head. Holy crap, what was that? The city was a rope hung between who we were and who we would become. And by building, we moved as fast as we could away from what we were towards what we could become. In these days, the comprehensive plan is in full effect. Progress is everywhere. Anything that holds it back is immediately removed. In order to succeed, all obstacles for the smooth transition into the unknown have been dismantled. Only by doing this, it is possible to create the exponential development that has become necessary for our
40,000 hours. I think it was 140,160 hours. If I make a mistake, then we might lose the time that we were supposed to be in. So that hour adjustment, please excuse that. And then we're going to have a little talk, if we can, just for a few minutes, all together. So we don't need a break. We can just start with a couple questions, maybe. So, right, are you all acclimatized? You got your clocks set at the right time? Okay, so, oh, it's okay. I was going to ask a couple questions, but I think the first question we had, I was looking for Maria, just ran off because we were just going to start with wondering what this place would be like in the year 2030, and whether a place like this exists. Well, while she's coming around, I think, should we be interrogating our protagonists? I don't know. Dougal, do you have any